All right. Can you guys hear me now? Not hearing anything. Sorry. Just a minute. I will fix this momentarily. Appreciate your patience. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, okay, you can hear me now. Thank you. All right, perfect. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. All right, so let me get back to showing my screen. Share screen. Okay. Thank you so much for letting me know that. So just to repeat again, thank you to Healthy Planet and Now Health Group for sponsoring tonight. And thank you for those of you who let me know that you couldn't hear me. The recording will be emailed to you, so you don't have to take notes. You will get it, but it will also be placed on YouTube permanently, I assume. I will take questions at the end for 10-15 minutes, and I'm going to check the Q&A area. So please, if you have questions for me, write them in the Q&A area. But if you just want to chat with one another or with the moderator, you can do that in the chat area if she joins. I apologize, I'm not sure if she is there or not, but I'm sure she will let me know. Elizabeth, if you're there, just kind of pipe in with your volume so I know. All right. I'm just going to check again that you can hear me. Okay. So this is me. Hello. As an introduction, nice to meet you all. My name is Thalia Charney. I'm the Nutrition and Health Education Manager for Now Foods Canada. I'm a holistic nutrition and wellness coach, and I'm also an author, an educator, which I'm very passionate about, and a speaker. And my training values, most importantly, are honesty, objectivity, nuance, and humility. And an important but necessary disclaimer, this presentation is for general informational purposes only, so it does not constitute the practice of medicine. The use of information either written here or stated here, or materials linked from here, or even questions answered at the end are at the user's own risk. Nothing here is a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. And if you want to know specifics about if any products I mentioned, about the doses, what are the contraindications, what are the risks, is all on the bottle. So you can just go to nowfoods.ca and search the specific product and get that information there anytime. Just a little bit of backstory on Now Foods for those of you who are not familiar. We are family owned, 52 years now, which is pretty amazing. We are known for a sort of obsessive commitment to quality. So we have 200 dedicated scientists, PhDs, just to quality control. We do 16,000 individual quality tests on a monthly basis on our product line. And just as one example, we test for over 500 different kinds of pesticides. We have a dedicated lab to that as well. For our manufacturing practices, we actually have had an A rating for all the years that we've ever been monitored, but we actually volunteered to be monitored before it was mandatory, and we were instrumental in getting good manufacturing practices to actually come out to the industry. So it's really important to us. All right, so now understanding constipation. Well, this is why you are here. So what is constipation? I'm going to see if I can get I love my laser pointer. It's a little bit of like a he said, she said, or controversial. There's 3 different characteristics to constipation. It's not just about stool frequency, but certainly that's what most people think about. There's no real agreed normal. So you might hear a medical doctor say if you go 3 times a week, that's fine. And you might hear a naturopath say, you need to go daily, if not 2 or 3 times a day. That can be confusing, and I don't think that I'm going to resolve that tonight. It's just the reality. We don't know. There might be an average. But stool consistency is also, so you can go every day, but you have a hard, dry stool. That's also a form of constipation. Or just difficult evacuation. You're just straining, and of course that can lead to hemorrhoids and other things. So all of those are types of, or are constipation. Constipation, it has many causes, but it is the quintessential disease of the civilized world. It has a lot to do with what we've taken on in terms of not being very active and how we eat. And I want you to think of constipation more as a symptom, because if you're here tonight, you probably already had it for a while, and you've probably already tried things. And so one of the most important things always in terms of principles is treat the root cause. And there may be layers of causes. It may be lifestyle related. So, I'm going to focus mostly on the lifestyle related tonight, because it would be impossible to look at all the other possible causes here. But if you've got all of these under your belt, then you got to start thinking about these other things. So I will talk about bathroom hygiene, irregular routine. So our body is on a circadian rhythm, not just sleeping and wake cycle, but when our bowels go, our body loves regularity. So if you eat at the same time, exercise at the same time, go to sleep and wake up at the same time, that's going to help regulate the bowel movements too. The body takes these signals. And I talk a lot about that in my sleep talk that I've done. Sedentary lifestyle, I will get to that. And poor diet, I'm going to get to that, of course. But there are other things that you have to rule out. It could be on iron supplements that are constipating. Always rule out, you can have something serious like a structural issue. People get temporarily constipated when they travel. Maybe it's stress related. Neurological diseases cause constipation too. It's common with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. Endocrine diseases as well, like diabetes and sluggish thyroid, are also related. There's a lot of it's related to colon cancer. There's different drugs, stress, and small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, or called SIBO, which is something that's fairly recent in our understanding. We still don't quite understand it, is also sometimes related to constipation. Constipation may cause SIBO, I'm not sure, or SIBO may, cause constipation. But it's a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and that's something that's kind of a growing awareness around that. One of the important things about just our stool, we want to call it a glob moving through our intestines, is housekeeping, just like you do. There's certain things we want to sweep through and eliminate. So it's not just our food or leftovers from our food, our fiber, our roughage that passes through, but we also eliminate toxins this way. A certain amount of water goes out. We dump bacteria as part of the bulk of our stool, dead cells that slough off. Hormones, cholesterol. So in one way, we help regulate our hormones like estrogen or cholesterol through this housekeeping mechanism. So if it's not working, it can affect many things. That's kind of, I like to think of bowel movements as around the Goldilocks principle. You don't want them to move, this bolus to move too quickly or too slowly through the digestive tract. There's that happy medium. If it goes too quickly, you might have loose stools. You're not able to absorb your nutrients properly because it goes too fast. If it's too slow, your body will absorb so much water on the way that it becomes dry. So there is a happy medium. So just about how things move through the body. We do have what's called segmentation. What happens is that this bolus kind of moves back and forth in the upper GI. So it's not always moving downwards. And this helps mix the contents of our food with enzymes and with bile and all these things we need for proper digestion. So that's important. But then there's the overall, at the end of the day, we want our food, or the roughage, and all those other things to move all the way through and out the other end. And that involves, I call it an orchestra. So all of these things have to be coordinated in order for it to work properly. When you're eating, you have this peristalsis that occurs. When you're eating, it triggers this, and it involves, here's your food bolus, you have a muscle contracting behind it, a relaxing of a smooth muscle in front of it, and that kind of alternates to move it along. But that requires the nervous system. So the GI tract is highly innervated to the central nervous system and other areas that I'm sure you've heard of, the gut-brain link. Not the topic of tonight, but if there's any issues with the nervous system, and there's all kinds of hormones or chemical messengers involved as well. So for example, here acetylcholine is an important chemical in our brain that's important for memory, but also motor and muscle contraction. So this all has to work together, which means that, if you have constipation, if you've had it for years, it's just not necessarily fiber or water. It could be any amount of things, including these. Now that's during your meal, but between meals, if you are patient enough to wait 90 to 120 minutes between your meals, then you get what's called it's a migrating motility complex. It occurs only when we're fasting, and it moves stuff through the small intestines all the way to the large intestines, which means if we're following the old advice to eat many small frequent meals, then we're going to interrupt this process. So for people who are constipated, this may not be something, it might be something to reconsider. Anything here, of course, when I say reconsider, you got to run it by a healthcare provider who knows you and can decide what's best. There are many drugs that can induce constipation. Opioids are definitely the worst. They can have a profound effect, but there are others as well. For people on Parkinson's disease, there's certain antidepressants, antispasmodics. So that's always good to rule out. You should know that before you start just trying to take things randomly. Now there are different kinds of constipation. Actually, I'm going to skip to this next one, is where I meant to go. Different kinds of constipation. Divided in many different ways, but one of the ways is some people have more of a kind of lazy constipation where the tone of the bowel it's kind of like it's lax. It's like having a muscle that's not very strong. And someone who has this more lazy bowel will tend to have large bowel movements, but infrequently, every few days. And such a person is more likely to respond to laxatives, especially stimulating laxatives, kind of like a kick in the butt, get you going. And this is most often lifestyle related, this lazy constipation. Then there's spastic constipation. An indication of this is that your bowels look like hard pellets, kind of like a bunny rabbit, if anyone has, or toothpaste-like. So you'll see parts where it's wider and more narrow and wider. So you can tell that there's been spasm going on. This form of constipation could be aggravated by laxatives, especially the stimulating kind, which I will get to. So we have to use the right, the right kind of remedies. And spastic constipation often has associated pain. A lot of people are diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome with constipation. Irritable bowel syndrome is a very general term that basically developed to describe a set of symptoms for something that we don't have an underlying cause. And so we just lump it in and call it irritable bowel syndrome. Now, if bloating is the dominant symptom for constipation, then fiber may aggravate because fiber feeds bacteria in our bowel, and it's the bacteria that produce gases that cause bloating. So if you tend to be very bloated as someone, then it's a good idea to introduce fiber slowly, if at all. Your healthcare provider may say not to do it at this point. And you need to rule out things that may be causing that bloating, lactose intolerance, Or again, SIBO. These are just a couple of examples. Our bacteria produce different gases, and methane gas is one of them, and that tends to be related to constipation. So we'd have to deal with the SIBO to get the constipation controlled. Never miss the very basics because they're important, and often, like with drinking water, there are myths. So the old, you need to have 8 glasses of water a day. It's a very outdated suggestion. Now, if you've been told this by a healthcare provider, by all means follow that. But this is a basic estimate, assuming many things. But how much water we need is going to depend on how much we sweat, how much is already in our food. If you eat a lot of soups or fruits, vegetables, they naturally contain water. We have to take that into account. The weather outside, there's many different things, and the body tightly regulates our water. So we don't need to force water into our mouth when we don't feel thirsty, for the most part. There are people who don't have a proper sense of when they're thirsty. It can be neurological damage. I've seen this in like people with Alzheimer's, but for the most part, we should know. So we must drink water, and if we're very dehydrated, definitely will cause constipation. But it doesn't necessarily have to be 8 glasses of water. Maybe for someone it's going to be even more because you're highly active and it's very hot. One little study mentioned that carbonated water by itself may help with constipation. So that's just an interesting little tidbit you might want to try. And of course, the best diet for constipation is on a mostly plant-based diet. Doesn't mean you can't eat things that are not plants, but we don't get fiber from animal foods, from yogurt or cheese or meats. We don't get fiber. So most of your diet should be plant-based. And also avoiding a sedentary lifestyle. So I didn't find any specific studies on this, but I can tell you from my personal experience that exercise for me has a huge impact. I go running in the early morning and I got to go right after that. That signal is strong, and that doesn't occur otherwise. I found that when I go to the gym and I do rowing, so there's that rocking back and forth, I guess it kind of like massages the bowels, that gets me going as well. So I think exercise is very important, and that can also be a contributing factor. And lastly, and this is kind of, I guess, systemic problem, is that we are all sitting in the wrong posture. People who are in countries where they're squatting over a hole, and sometimes we misrepresent this as being primitive, but it's actually, it's more sophisticated. It's the proper position to be squatting. Now you're not necessarily going to be able to get a hole in your bathroom, but by at least putting a high stool, then you can get at this 35-degree. This is ideal, this ideal angle. It will also prevent the dry stools from rubbing against the end of the colon, where we can get irritation and hemorrhoids. And there are certain things you can buy online, I've seen, where you can squat right on your toilet. So if you Google, you'll probably find something. But what about fiber? And we can't talk about constipation and not talk about fiber. We have lost a lot of fiber in our diets, as per sort of the white bread and white rice used to at first be the food for the upper class, and now everyone has access to it. It was thought to be something better and desirable, but as this quote says, the whiter your bread, the sooner you're dead. Fiber is simply all non-digestible parts of plant foods. Kind of like if you're juicing, if you have a juicer, all the stuff that comes out on the one side, all that roughage, that's the part that you can't digest. Also includes lignans. And there are sometimes where how we handle our foods can make them fiber-like, even though technically they're not. So you've all experienced when you cook potatoes and the next day, if you leave them in the refrigerator, they're kind of very hard and chewy. This creates what's called resistant starch, and it can act like a fiber in some ways. It actually can create benefits for your blood sugar because it is going to release sugar molecules more slowly. And there's two different kinds of fibers. If you want to simplify this, I'll go through this, but if you eat a whole food diet, you will get all of the fibers you need, because most foods, with a couple of exceptions, are just really a balance between two types, soluble and insoluble. So if you eat a variety of whole foods diet, you don't have to start, counting and measuring and looking at what foods. But here's some examples of soluble fibers, like oat bran. And a soluble fiber, as it says, soluble means that the fiber absorbs a lot of the water. When you eat soluble fiber, it creates this viscous gel. Just imagine this gel. There are a few important things this viscous gel does. One, in not all, but some soluble fibers can get fermented by the bacteria in your colon. This provides food for them, which is very important. And there are also other benefits to those prebiotics or fermentable carbohydrates. Might lower cholesterol. There's other things as well. This soluble glob also slows down digestion in the small intestines. Remember, I said it's the Goldilocks principle, not too fast, not too slow. The advantage of that is that we'll feel full longer if it sits in our stomach for a little bit longer. And also, it will have some of these positive effects on cholesterol or different blood lipids and blood sugar. Not all soluble fibers seem to have these properties when tested, but I will show you some that do. So it slows down digestion in the small intestines, but that doesn't mean it causes constipation. That's just a normal role for it. And because it's this gel-like thing, the lubrication, it acts as a lubrication for easy passing of the stool. And in that sense, helps with constipation, because as I mentioned, one type of constipation is, if we don't have an easily passing stool. Most of the supplements out there, fiber, are soluble unless you're buying a whole food in the soluble form. But we also need insoluble roughage. Here are some examples, like wheat bran and wheat germ is a popular one, apple and pear skins and such. And what insoluble fibers do, think of them more as something that scrapes. The insoluble fibers, they do not absorb water. But what they do is they scrape, which can help remove kind of that housekeeping function. And because they provide some pressure on the bowel walls, this is a necessary signal to move the food through the last part of our GI tract, which is the colon. So the insoluble fibers are important for that. And they also help control the pH of the bowel. So both of them are necessary, bottom line. How much fiber do we need? So in Health Canada gives us an idea. Most Canadians get about half of this, so that is significantly less. I concur with this. My own clients, I'd often have them take the nutrition facts label, calculate for a couple of days, and most people were shocked. Most of them would say, I'm pretty sure I'm good, and then see that they're only getting half, if. So don't assume, test it out. It's a good exercise to do. Kids, you can decide their fiber amount sort of by age, adding 5 to their age. And then you'll have naturopaths or other alternative healthcare practitioners will say, yeah, that amount of fiber is okay, but the ideal amounts reflect more what our ancestors had and will suggest more, 50 or more daily. So it's going to vary. There are many links between fiber and reduced risk of different diseases. Diverticulitis, diabetes, hemorrhoids, and so on, including lower risk of colon and breast cancer. So fiber is very important. We definitely can't deny that. All right, so I'm going to talk about now laxatives for constipation, but there's not just one kind of laxative. So there's 4 classes of laxatives. Can help you to figure out, if you are using laxatives, which one may be better for you. And again, run this by a provider, healthcare provider who knows you well. So we're going to start with stool softeners. Number 1, so stool softeners, if you go to a drugstore, you can usually get these glycerin suppositories, and those are kind of a very well-known stool softener. They're helpful for mild constipation. Sometimes these are given to infants even. And they may be good for hard, painful stools. because they soften. So that is a popular one. But in the natural health herbal area, there's slippery elm. I don't think it's technically called a stool softener, but I would say it is. It's in herbal medicine, it's called a demulcent, which means it has a kind of soothing, slimy, mucilaginous property, and it softens and soothes. This is slippery elm. It's a bark, and it's traditionally used to treat both diarrhea and constipation. It's not uncommon for fibers to help with both hemorrhoids and IBS. So if you've got dry, painful stools, slippery elm, and you can combine some of these together. You can have more than one kind of laxative together. Then we have osmotic laxatives. Osmotic laxatives draw water into the colon. So if your bowel is the last part of your bowel movement in the colon, if it's moving too slowly, what happens in the colon is it absorbs water out of that bolus. If it goes too slowly, it will absorb too much, and you'll end up with a dry stool. So a way of pulling water back into the colon is different kinds of osmotic laxatives. Magnesium oxide is an excellent and inexpensive one. It's a poorly absorbed form of magnesium, which is what you want, because sometimes if something's poorly absorbed, it can act as osmotic laxative. Alcohol sugars, I'll show you this. And vitamin C, Linus Pauling popularized the very high dose use of vitamin C for other things, but his advice was to take it as high as you can until bowel tolerance, because eventually it's going to cause loose stools. So magnesium oxide is sometimes poo-pooed as being, bad magnesium, which I don't think it is. Like, it is less well absorbed than some others, but it's excellent for constipation. It's the best form, and it's also inexpensive. I use xylitol a lot as a natural alcohol sugar to sweeten my teas and such, and it definitely has that same effect and can help with the bowel movements. So for osmotic laxatives, they work best if taken daily, unless you don't have a dry stool anymore. They're good for that slow transit constipation or anytime it's dry. The general dosing rule, of course, I have to tell you to follow what's on the product, but the idea is you increase the dose until you have, until it's easy to pass. So it may be different for different people. And the nice thing is that they're low risk. They don't cause damage or dependence like some of the others I will show you. And you can combine one of those with slippery elm. You can combine certain fibers together. Now we have the stimulant laxatives. This is where we get into a little bit more tricky area. Stimulants, so they kind of irritate the bowels. They have these chemicals, anthraquinone glycosides, that irritate the bowels and help propel that bolus through more quickly. They also promote water retention. Some examples are senna and cascara, which I'm going to show you in a little more detail, and certainly whole aloe vera. So warning for stimulant laxatives. Now they're useful for slow transit constipation. Again, it's just think of something that's so slow, you're going to want to give it a kick, move it. And maybe for the best use, I think, for it is occasional constipation. You get constipated every time you go on a road trip and you take it for a short period of time. Might have to do with routine, change in foods, stress. And it may combine with osmotic laxatives. So you can take these with, say, magnesium oxide, if it works for you. Best practices, consult a healthcare practitioner beyond 1 week. That's what it says on all stimulant laxative bottles, and avoid in the very young children. So there are potential side effects. This is the least kind of, this is the most problematic in terms of we got to worry about side effects or long-term effects for stimulant laxatives. It can cause dependence, it's thought. So your colon eventually just can't go by itself, although that's still kind of poorly understood. If you take too much or you're sensitive, it can cause abdominal cramping. Long-term use can make your colon turn this black pigmented color, which looks very scary. As far as we know, it's not dangerous. Can cause electrolyte imbalances. because you have more water, you're pushing things through quickly, you might be losing salt and chloride, and if you don't replenish those, you could be in danger in some cases. And diarrhea, again, it's dose dependent. I will say, even though I am saying that do not use for more than 7 days, I've met many people, especially seniors, who've been on them for years. That's just the reality, because they're, maybe their doctors just don't try to deal with underlying cause. Maybe it's difficult. I'm not judging them, but that does happen definitely quite commonly. Cascara sagrada, traditionally its name is sacred bark, is a laxative, promotes bowel function. I have put the risk information here, but as I said, it's all on the bottle or on our website, just for these ones, because they're just a little more, you just got to be mindful of them. And also to show you that these can be used in children greater than 12 years old, so not younger. And senna is another stimulant laxative. It's a bit stronger than cascara, a little bit more oomph. Also traditionally used as a laxative. Here's a tea. I like the tea because I think warm liquids are a good thing for constipation. If you're buying senna, the leaf is stronger than the pods. You can get different parts. So this is the leaf. I believe this organic senna by now. And this is okay for adolescents 11 and over, but again, the warning beyond 7 days. Obviously, it's an arbitrary number, 8 days, 7 days, whatever, but you don't want to be using it a long time. Castor oil is another stimulant laxative with a history, has a history of use to bring on labor. So you got to be really careful with this. Never take it when pregnant, because it causes contractions, not only of the smooth muscle in the bowel, but also the uterus. This one is combined with fennel, and why I like that is because when you're taking a stimulant laxative, so you're more likely to get side effects from that stimulation, and fennel is a calming herb, so in combination it might reduce the incidence of those side effects. And not everyone gets those side effects, just some people might get a little bit of discomfort. So castor oil has another interesting use as an actual topical oil. This use originated by Edgar Casey. He was a famous psychic known as the bedside healer, and he discovered somehow that castor oil seems to move things. And he applied it externally through a castor oil pack. You can look that up online, but essentially you're soaking flannel in warmed castor oil, putting it on the belly, and doing this maybe a few times a week. It's not uncommon for a naturopath to recommend this to a patient who has the patience to do that. You can also use castor oil. This is one where I say this is a great remedy you can use with kids safely, because you're using it externally. Warm it up a little bit and massage the large colon in the direction that the stool's moving. So that's going to be from the bottom right of where the hip is, upwards, across, down, and this way. Now you do need to be careful of the ribs on both sides. Babies or little kids are not that fragile. You can push really deep into the stomach. You're not going to hurt them, but you don't want to be pushing on the ribs. So get someone to show you if you're kind of not sure how to orient that. And dandelion tea can be a more gentle, stimulating herb. It is thought to work by increasing bile production from the liver. Our bile that comes from the liver is dumped into our GI tract, and it acts as a little bit of an irritant. It does other things as well, but it's helpful to get our bowels moving. So anything that is thought to stimulate that bile production or excretion. Dandelion, in this case, the leaf has a little bit of a diuretic effect. So you need to be mindful. If you're on diuretics, probably not the best thing to use. Then you can use other things. And lastly, bulk laxatives. So bulk laxatives, which basically what we call fiber, mostly soluble fiber, are the first line of choice for uncomplicated constipation. What I mean by that is what they call in mainstream medicine idiopathic constipation. It doesn't have any known cause. It's not related to Parkinson's or, because you once had severe food poisoning, which can cause a lot of changes and disruptions, but it's just kind of ordinary constipation. I don't believe there's any such thing as, something that doesn't have a cause, because everything has to have a cause. But so for slow transit constipation, where it gets really dry, these bulk laxatives are a great way of adding water, and as I mentioned, can create that gel. So when you take fiber, a soluble fiber, which is going to be all the supplements I'm going to show you next, when you take a soluble fiber, it has to have water to absorb. So if you take a ton of fiber in a supplement but don't add enough water, you could potentially make the issue worse, because now you have this dry fiber that doesn't have the water to absorb to make that gel. So just make sure you are, not dehydrated and then taking fiber. And these bulk laxatives work because they're bulky, they push on the walls of the GI tract, and that causes a kind of a message to the body to propel the food. In fact, even when food lands up in your stomach, it's helping with bowel movements much further down. And the best thing about bulk laxatives is, for the most part, they're safe for long term, unless you're someone who reacts badly to them. There are some limitations. You do require proper reflexes. If your reflexes are not working, if you've got nerve damage, if your constipation is related to something like Parkinson's or MS, then these may not do the trick, or not as well. And also, taking fiber can worsen a situation where you have a lot of impacted feces, or hopefully not an obstruction or a constriction you don't know about. That's why we always gotta, if you have chronic constipation, get it looked at. So psyllium is what I'm going to start with. You can actually probably see this around your neighborhood if you look. This is the psyllium husk. It is a rare, in terms of the balance for a whole food. It is by weight, I think, over 70% soluble fiber. So for a food, that's kind of exceptional. So it gives you a lot of soluble fiber, highly mucilaginous. If you take it and you mix it into water, a whole glass of water, and you mix a tablespoon and you walk away and you come back maybe, sometime later, you'll see already the thick kind of gel, slimy thing that's going to then be in your bowels. High long-term safety record, gently relieves constipation. It has proved, at least so far, to have to perform better than other soluble fibers when it came to certain studies. So psyllium, now I'm recommending it for constipation, but it does other things in terms of lowering cholesterol. So lowering LDLs, what we call the bad cholesterol. Triglycerides are fats that circulating in our body can be a risk factor for heart disease. So soluble fibers, generally speaking, are known to maybe help lower our risk factors for cardiovascular disease, but not all of them show in studies to do this, and certainly not equally well. Psyllium was compared to 10 fibers, and it had the best outcome in terms of lowering cardiovascular risk. So it is a good choice, can double for both those things. So the evidence for that is pretty strong. Then it also may be effective for other things: hemorrhoids, constipation from Parkinson's, IBS. I'll get to this. So the opposite of constipation, diarrhea or incontinence, fecal incontinence. I mentioned before that fibers can act both ways. Shown to maintain remission for those who have ulcerative colitis. It is not a good option for someone who's in an acute stage of ulcerative colitis, but if they're in remission or subacute, it may be okay. Reduces the incidence of gallbladder disease as well. So psyllium has this interesting dual role. It helps constipation because it's bulking and softening, so like a stool softener, and it helps with diarrhea because with diarrhea, of course, everything's moving too quickly, and therefore the water can't get absorbed out of the colon quickly enough. So it delays the emptying from the stomach. It improves the consistency of the stool. And now here's a recipe made from a nutritionist, Lisa Codispoti. She made this lovely psyllium mussels. You can see here's her Instagram account with psyllium. Psyllium is very versatile. You can take, I find, just about any recipe and just add a little bit in without it really modifying it much. You can try more, less, start small. You can add more and see how it works. But this is for psyllium muffins. They look delicious. Flaxseed and chia seeds. So flaxseed and chia seeds, this is now, these are whole foods, whole seeds. I eat both of them and I've been having them for years. A little bit of a comparison here because some people ask which is better, and I say neither is better. They're just different and they're both great. Flaxseed is less expensive, so definitely it's great that way. Both of them offer omega-3 fatty acids, so they're a good vegetarian source for those who can't eat or choose not to eat fish. Both of these can give you those anti-inflammatory omega-3s. And of course, if you have a whole food and you're grinding it up, it's going to be giving you all the nutrients and the oils as well as the fiber. So they provide bulk and a lubrication. But with chia, you can really have a lot of fun. It's so versatile because of its very mucilaginous characteristic. You can use it as an egg replacement for any recipe, so turn any baked recipe into a vegan recipe. You'll see online all over the place directions for that. You can just throw chia seeds into a drink. It can be water, but usually people will use juice or something else and make this lovely. I think this is derived from Mexico. And this is so interesting. If you have guests coming over, you can surprise them, then you can just drink them. And chia pudding, which is very popular and a wonderful way to give kids a dessert that's actually very, very healthy. And you just soak the chia seeds in some kind of milk. Doesn't have to be dairy milk, and add some other flavorings and recipes everywhere. I want to mention Triphala, which means 3 fruits. Triphala is a traditional Ayurvedic remedy. I usually seen it when I go into at first was Indian grocery stores where I would see it. Triphala, as the name says, is 3 fruits. So it's just a combination of these 3 fruits that are ground up together, and it has long been used as a digestive cleanser. Not a very medical term, but in herbal medicine, we'll say that. Fiber does cleanse in the sense that it grabs onto things that we want to eliminate, and as a tonic. So a tonic. So to get the idea of what I mean by tonic, now it has tannins in it. So this is in a supplement form. Tannins, if you've ever eaten a not so ripe banana and you get that funny feeling on your tongue, that's the tannins, and they tighten the tissue. So if you have a lazy bowel, tannins may tighten and help with constipation. And there's no restriction on terms of the time to take this in terms of 1 week or 2 weeks. This particular product here is combined with magnesium oxide, so it can also attract some water into the bowels. As much as I'd love to do the traditional way, I used to try to get my clients, I even tried myself to take Triphala the old-fashioned way, mixing this powder with water, but it was just, for me, unpalatable. So, for most people, taking it in a tablet or pill form is going to be better. Lastly, I want to talk about, this is a really interesting product, trademark ingredient called Fibersol. Fibersol it's a prebiotic fiber. So prebiotic, it sounds a lot like a probiotic. Probiotics are bacteria. If you get a supplement that's a probiotic, it's bacteria that impart health value. Prebiotics feed those bacteria. Bacteria, just like us, need food to stay alive and to thrive. So it is a known prebiotic. Not all soluble fibers are. But what makes it really interesting, and I'm being funny here for picky adults, it can be for anyone, but it is completely tasteless, has no texture, and there's different degrees of soluble. If you mix this fiber into a glass of water and come back a week later, you will still not see it. It will never settle out. Tested this, at least I tested it for 24 hours. So it'd be very easy to hide it from someone who's resistant to taking fiber, but also it's resistant to heat, to freezing. So I've done all kinds of stuff. I've added it into all kinds of recipes without any problem. Here's an example. I made these gummy hearts with fiber sole. I put in a few tablespoons, and there's juice and gelatin and other things. So I just took a kind of general online recipe and I added the fiber sole to it. So it's very flexible that way to fiber up interesting recipes. And as I said, it's a prebiotic, so they've got a lot of studies. This has been around for a long time. It says on the bottle, could help to temporarily increase satiety because it's soluble, feelings of fullness, and helps provide gentle relief of constipation and irregularity. That's all been studied by them, but they also showed here with continued use that it increases a bacteria in the bowel. Bifidobacteria are the ones predominantly in your colon. Oh, and that came faster than I thought. So that is the end of my talk on constipation. I hope you learned something. Going to just do a few housekeeping things before I get to the questions. So give me a second.